My stepmother forced me into a marriage just to get rid of me, never knowing who my future husband truly was. In our town, people didn't whisper my name anymore. They whispered my future instead. I didn't hear about my marriage from a proposal or a conversation or even an argument. I heard about it the same way you hear about bad weather coming, through a calm voice that assumed resistance was pointless. "You'll be married by the end of the month," my stepmother said, folding a napkin beside her plate as if she were announcing dinner plans. I remember the sound of the ceiling fan more than her words, a steady click, 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 slicing the air between us. I remember how my coffee had gone cold in my hands. I remember thinking, this isn't love. This was a forced marriage, decided in a small town where secrets never stay buried, and where being married against your will was somehow considered better than being unwanted. My name is Angelica, and this is not my love story, not at first. This is a story about how a girl became a solution. After my father died, I learned something no one teaches you directly. Grief has an expiration date. After that, you're expected to stop reminding people of what they lost. My stepmother, Margaret, never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence did more damage than shouting ever could. She wasn't cruel, she was efficient. In a town like ours, one of those small American towns where everyone smiles too long and remembers too much, status mattered more than kindness. You were either useful or you were in the way. And after my father's death, I became something worse than both. I became inconvenient. Margaret never said she wanted me gone. She said things like, "It's time for you to start your own life," or "This is a good opportunity." She framed everything as generosity. Even now, I can hear her voice in my head saying, "I gave her a husband. That's more than life gave me." The man's name was Bradley. I had seen him before, I think. Everyone had. He lived on the edge of town, in a modest house with the lights always off too early. No social media, no public presence. People spoke about him in unfinished sentences. "He used to be someone," they'd say. "Something happened to him. He's different now." In a place where rumors were currency, his silence made him expensive. They said he was socially strange, emotionally broken. Some hinted he was aggressive. Others said he was a failure. What they agreed on was this: he needed a wife and I needed a place to go. A marriage of convenience, an arranged marriage disguised as mercy. Margaret explained it like a contract because that's what it was. Bradley needed stability for reasons she claimed not to fully understand. I needed to stop existing loudly in her house. "Two broken people can't hurt anyone else," she said once, not unkindly. The wedding happened fast, too fast for doubt to gather courage. There were no romantic gestures, no trembling hands, no dramatic objections. Just paperwork, a borrowed dress, and a ceremony that felt more administrative than sacred. As I stood beside a man I barely knew, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a marriage without love. This was a marriage designed to erase me quietly. Before we go any further, before I tell you what happened after that door closed behind us, I want to pause for just a moment. If stories like this speak to you, if you believe in realistic emotional storytelling, in real hearts and real possibilities, then consider subscribing to this channel. And if you feel comfortable, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, what city, what state, what corner of the world. It matters more than you think. Because this story, it doesn't belong to just one place.
The night after the wedding, Bradley drove us to his house in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, not an angry one, something else. Something guarded. When we arrived, he carried my suitcase inside without comment. The house was clean, sparse, almost painfully intentional. No photos, no clutter, no emotional fingerprints on the walls. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, and said the words that cracked something open inside me. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "not even conversation." I looked at him then, really looked, and felt the ground shift. Because for the first time since my father died, I wasn't being managed. I wasn't being solved. And that scared me more than the marriage itself. I went to bed that night in a stranger's house, married to a man the town had already judged. I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. I was wrong. Very wrong. The first thing I learned about being married to Bradley was that nothing was demanded of me. Not my smile, not my gratitude, not even my presence. The morning after the wedding, I woke up before dawn out of habit. In Margaret's house, being awake early was a form of invisibility. If you moved quietly enough, you didn't become a problem. I padded down the hallway, expecting to feel like a guest in someone else's life. Instead, I smelled coffee. It wasn't loud or showy, just the low hum of a machine, steady and patient. When I entered the kitchen, Bradley stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from a shower. He glanced at me, paused, and then did something that caught me completely off guard. He stepped back, not away from me, for me, giving me space, choice. "Morning," he said carefully, as if testing the word. "Morning," I replied, my voice unsure of itself. 2 mugs sat on the counter. He slid one toward me without asking how I liked my coffee. No assumptions, no questions, just an offering. This was not what I expected from a man the town described as difficult, or aggressive, or broken beyond repair. This was a misunderstood man living inside a house that felt more like a truce than a home. We drank in silence, not the heavy kind, the kind that didn't rush to fill itself. Living with Bradley was like learning a new language where nothing was implied. Every door was open, every rule was spoken out loud. "You can use the guest room as long as you want," he said later that day, standing in the hallway like a man afraid of crossing an invisible line. "Or not, whatever you prefer." "You don't care?" I asked before I could stop myself. He met my eyes then, really met them, and in that brief moment I saw something familiar there. Not indifference, resignation. "I care," he said slowly. "I just won't control." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. This marriage was supposed to feel like a punishment, like being married off to disappear. Instead, it felt like being placed inside a quiet room where I could finally hear my own thoughts. Bradley left every day at the same time. I didn't know where he went, and he didn't explain. He returned before sunset, always with groceries, always with something small and unnecessary tucked inside the bag. Extra apples, a different kind of bread, once a potted plant he placed by the window without comment. Our conversations were brief, almost cautious. He never asked about my past, never mentioned Margaret, never treated me like an unwanted daughter or a charity case. That should have made things easier. Instead, it made them dangerous, because kindness without conditions has a way of undoing people who grew up rationing affection. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the living room, I noticed something strange. No photos, not a single framed memory. No childhood pictures, no family gatherings, no evidence that anyone had ever stayed long enough to leave a mark. "Do you not like pictures?" I asked when he passed by. He stopped. For a moment, I thought I'd crossed a line. Then he said quietly, "I don't trust them." I didn't ask why. I was learning that Bradley's silences weren't walls. They were doors you had to wait to be invited through. The town, however, wasn't waiting. At the grocery store, conversations stopped when I entered an aisle. Eyes lingered, smiles tightened. I was no longer just the unwanted daughter. I was the woman forced to marry a stranger, the proof that family betrayal could be disguised as practicality. Someone whispered, "I heard she had no choice." Someone else replied, "At least he needed her." Needed, as if that justified everything. That night, I came home shaking with anger I didn't know where to place. Bradley noticed immediately. "You don't have to talk," he said gently, "but dinner's ready."
We ate across from each other, the space between us charged with something unspoken. Finally, I said it. They think this marriage was my punishment. He didn't deny it, didn't argue. They think wrong, he said instead. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. Do they? Bradley set his fork down. His hands were steady, but his hands weren't. I didn't agree to this to save myself, he said. I agreed because it was necessary. Necessary, another word dressed up as mercy. For you or for me? I asked. He looked at me then with an expression I couldn't read, something between apology and warning. For both of us, he said. That night, lying in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and felt something unfamiliar stir beneath the exhaustion. Curiosity. Because whatever this marriage of convenience truly was, whatever hidden past Bradley was carrying, I was beginning to understand one dangerous truth. This wasn't a story about being forced into silence. It was a story about what happens when silence starts listening back. And I had the sudden, terrifying feeling that Bradley wasn't nearly as invisible or as broken as this town believed.
If our marriage had been loud, the town would have understood it. If Bradley had raised his voice, if I had cried in public, if there had been fights spilling onto front porches or slammed doors echoing down the street, people would have nodded knowingly. That was the kind of story they knew how to digest. But our marriage was quiet, and nothing unsettles a small town more than quiet people they can't categorize. The rumors evolved quickly. First, they pitied me. Then they pitied him. Eventually, they decided one of us had to be dangerous. I noticed it in the way cashiers stopped making eye contact, in the way invitations disappeared, in the way people leaned closer when Bradley's name came up, lowering their voices like they were discussing a crime scene instead of a man. "You're safe, though, right?" A woman from church asked me one Sunday, her smile trembling at the edges. I stared at her, stunned. "Safe?" she clarified. "With him, given his history." I wanted to ask her what history she meant. I wanted to ask who had told her. I wanted to ask why no one had ever bothered to ask me. But years of emotional abandonment had trained me well. I smiled politely and said nothing. That night, Bradley found me sitting on the back steps, staring into the dark. "You okay?" he asked, careful not to touch me. "They think you're dangerous," I said flatly. He exhaled slowly. "That's not new." I whispered, "You don't get angry? Doesn't it bother you that they treat you like a rumor instead of a person?" He sat beside me, leaving just enough space between us to respect the boundary neither of us had named yet. "It used to," he said. "Then I realized correcting people requires explaining myself, and I don't owe them that." Something about the way he said it, without bitterness, without self-pity, made my chest tighten. I had spent my entire life trying to prove I was worth keeping. Bradley lived like a man who had accepted that being misunderstood was cheaper than begging for belief. That scared me, because I was starting to care. The first time I noticed it, it was something small. I'd had a nightmare. My father's voice, Margaret's silence, the wedding all tangled together, and woke up shaking. I padded into the kitchen at 3 a.m. and found a light already on. Bradley was there, reading. He didn't ask questions, didn't make a joke, just stood, poured water into a glass, and slid it toward me. "Bad dreams?" he said, not asking. I nodded. "You can stay or go back to bed. Either way." I stayed. We didn't talk, but when I finally returned to the guest room, I realized something had shifted. The silence between us no longer felt empty. It felt shared. The slow burn of our marriage, this marriage without love that was never supposed to grow roots, started to change shape. It wasn't passion, it wasn't romance, it was presence. Coffee made before I woke, a coat placed quietly over my shoulders when I forgot one, Bradley fixing the loose step on the porch without telling me cooking dinner without being asked, simply because I wanted to. A quiet love story trying to not name itself. And that was when the town decided to dig deeper.
One afternoon, I overheard two women talking outside the pharmacy. I heard his family cut him off years ago. No, I heard he lost everything. My cousin says he's only married because he needs something. I froze. Needs something. That word echoed all the way home. When I confronted Bradley that evening, my voice betrayed me. Is it true? He looked up from the sink, startled. Is what true? That you only married me because you needed something? The air shifted instantly. The calm fractured. He dried his hands slowly, too slowly, like a man choosing every movement with care. Yes, he said. The honesty landed harder than any lie could have. What do you need? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the answer. I can't tell you yet, he said finally, but I will, when it's time. Time. Another word dressed up as protection. I should have been angry. I should have demanded answers. Instead, something colder settled into me. I deserve the truth, I said quietly. I know, and I swear you'll have it. That night, I lay awake wondering if I had mistaken safety for love, if this marriage of convenience had been built on yet another version of being useful to someone else. But the next morning, something arrived in the mail. An envelope, heavy, cream-colored, expensive, addressed to Bradley, with a return name I recognized immediately, a name no one in this town ever whispered quietly. And in that moment, I realized the rumors hadn't even scratched the surface of who my husband truly was.
I didn't open the envelope, not at first. It sat on the kitchen counter like it had weight, like paper alone could bend the air around it. Bradley hadn't noticed it yet, or maybe he had and was pretending not to. Either way, neither of us touched it. The return name pressed against my thoughts all afternoon. It wasn't local. It wasn't small. It wasn't a name people in this town said out loud unless they wanted to feel important. I knew it from headlines, from magazines left open in waiting rooms, from the kind of stories that belonged to another world entirely, and it had no business being connected to the man who fixed loose porch steps and brewed coffee at dawn. When Bradley finally picked it up, his face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, like a door closing softly. I should take this, he said. Who is it from? I asked too quickly. He hesitated, just long enough. Family, he replied. The word landed wrong. Family had never been simple for either of us, but the way he said it, measured, careful, made it sound less like blood and more like obligation. That night, Bradley stayed up late. I could hear the low murmur of his voice through the wall, pacing, stopping, pacing again. He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicked. He sounded cornered. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, realizing something I hadn't expected to feel this soon or this deeply. Fear, not of him, of losing whatever this was becoming. The next morning, the town was buzzing. It always happened like that. Information moved faster than truth, faster than decency. Someone had seen a car they didn't recognize parked near our house. Someone else had noticed Bradley wearing a watch they swore they'd seen in a magazine once. The narrative shifted. Now he wasn't dangerous. He was interesting. People smiled at me again, too wide, too curious. I heard your husband has connections, a woman said at the bakery, suddenly eager to chat. You must be proud. Proud. Of what? Of surviving? Of being chosen when no one else wanted me? I came home angry. Not loud anger, the kind that settles into your bones. Bradley noticed immediately. What happened? He asked. They're changing their minds about you, and I hate that it took rumors of power for them to treat us like people. He nodded once. That's how it works. It shouldn't, I snapped. He looked at me, then, really looked, and something in his expression softened. You're right. The quiet between us stretched, charged, dangerous. "I don't want to be part of this," I said suddenly. "Whatever this is, the curiosity, the assumptions, the lie," he offered gently. I flinched. "Yes," I whispered, "the lie." He stepped closer, then stopped himself, as if remembering the rules we'd never spoken. "He never lied to you," he said quietly. "I've just not told you everything." "That's not the same thing," I replied. My voice cracked. "You said you'd tell me when it was time, but what if I don't want to wait anymore?" That was the moment something broke open between us. "I'm trying to protect you," he said quietly. "From what? From the truth or from yourself?" The question hung between us like glass. Bradley ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then stopping in front of me. "I didn't plan to care," he said. "This marriage was supposed to be contained, predictable." My heart pounded. "And now," he continued, his voice low, "and now I'm terrified that telling you who I really am will make you look at me the same way they all did." The vulnerability in his voice undid me. "Who are you, Bradley?" I asked softly. He opened his mouth. Then the doorbell rang. We both froze. Through the window, I saw a sleek black car parked at the curb, out of place, polished, powerful. Bradley's face drained of color. "Whatever happens next," he said, barely of a whisper, "please remember, I never married you to disappear you." The knock came again, firmer this time, and in that moment, I knew the truth wasn't coming gently. It was coming to change everything.
Bradley opened the door himself. He didn't ask who it was, he already knew. Two men stood on the porch. Both wore tailored coats that didn't belong in our town, and both smiled the kind of smile that wasn't meant to be friendly. It was meant to be reassuring, which somehow made it worse. "Bradley," the taller one said warmly, "it's good to see you." I stayed in the hallway, unseen but listening, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. "I told you not to come here," Bradley replied. "And we told you time was running out," the other man said. "May we come in?" Bradley hesitated, just long enough. "That's my wife," he said, stepping aside. "Angelica." Wife. The word still startled me every time, but the way he said it now, firm, protective, sent something fierce through my chest. The men turned toward me, assessing, measuring. Their eyes flicked over my clothes, my posture, my face, as if I were part of the evaluation. One of them smiled wider. "Congratulations." I didn't thank him. We sat at the table like strangers playing house. Coffee was poured, small talk attempted, and then finally the taller man leaned forward. "You've satisfied the condition," he said calmly. "You're married, established, stable." My breath caught. Condition? Bradley's jaw tightened. "I told you not to send them," he said. "I would have handled it." "This is too important to leave to trust," the man replied. Then he turned to me. "Your husband stands to inherit a significant estate." I stared at him. "Estate?" The man paused, clearly amused by my confusion. "Yes," he said slowly, "the entire one." Silence swallowed the room. I looked at Bradley. He couldn't meet my eyes. "What estate?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. The second man cleared his throat. "Perhaps this isn't the ideal setting." "Say it," I said sharply. "All of it." Bradley finally looked at me, and in his gaze I saw fear, not of exposure, but of losing something he hadn't expected to need. "My grandfather," he said quietly, "was the founder of one of the largest private investment groups in the country." The words didn't register at first. They felt unreal, disconnected from the man who fixed broken steps and avoided photographs. He disowned me years ago, after everything fell apart. "And the condition?" I asked. His jaw dropped. "Marriage, public stability, proof I hadn't destroyed myself." I stood slowly, the room tilting. "They forced me into a marriage to solve their problem," I said, "and you married me to solve yours."
The men shifted uncomfortably. Bradley stood too, reaching for me, but stopping himself.
"It wasn't like that," he said. "Not entirely." "Wasn't it?" I whispered. "Was any part of this real?" "Yes," he said immediately, too quickly. "All of it was." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "You let me believe you were ordinary." "I am ordinary," he said. "The money doesn't change who I am." "But it changes how people see you," I replied. "It changes how they see me." The men rose, sensing the fracture. "We'll be in touch," one said smoothly. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Hale." The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through my bones. I turned to Bradley, tears burning my eyes, not from betrayal alone, but from something far more painful, understanding. "You didn't tell me because you thought I'd leave," I said. "Yes," he admitted. "And you were right," I said softly, "because now I don't know if I was ever chosen or just convenient." "That's not true," he said, stepping closer. "I never wanted a wife. I just didn't know I was waiting for you." The words landed deep, too deep. I backed away. "I need time," I said. "I need to know who I am in this story, because I wasn't married off to disappear." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Take all the time you need." That night, I packed a small bag. As I stepped out into the dark, the town lights flickering in the distance, one truth settled heavily in my chest. They thought this marriage would erase me. Instead, it had handed me a choice I'd never had before, and I had no idea which one would break my heart more. I didn't go far. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed air, distance, proof that I still belonged to myself. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I ran because staying meant feeling too much. I rented a small room above a bakery on the other side of town. The walls smelled like sugar and yeast, warm and comforting in a way that felt undeserved. Every morning, I woke to the sound of deliveries and laughter downstairs, life continuing, unbothered by my unraveling. The town noticed my absence immediately. In places like this, separation is louder than scandal. "You okay?" people asked with too much interest. "Everything all right with your husband?" I always knew that situation was complicated. They wanted drama. They wanted failure. They wanted proof that a marriage built without love couldn't survive truth. I gave them nothing. Bradley didn't come after me right away. That hurt more than I expected. A week passed, then another. No calls, no messages, just silence. His favorite language, turned against me. I told myself it was respect, that he was giving me space. But at night, alone in that borrowed bed, I wondered if he was relieved. When he finally showed up, it wasn't dramatic. No rain, no raised voices, just a knock at the bakery door after closing hours. I opened it and froze. He looked the same, tired, composed, but something behind his eyes had shifted, like a man bracing for impact he'd already accepted. "I'm not here to convince you," he said immediately, "or to explain myself again." "Then why are you here?" I asked, folding my arms around myself. "Because you deserve the truth, all of it, even if it costs you." That sentence landed harder than any apology. We sat at a small table by the window. The streetlight cast shadows across his face, making him look older somehow. "I lost everything once," he began, publicly, all at once. He told me about the scandal, the accusations that weren't entirely lies, but weren't the full truth either, about how one bad decision had snowballed into a narrative he couldn't outrun, how his family chose distance over defense. "They didn't just disown me," he said quietly. "They erased me." I listened, my chest aching, not because of the money, not because of the name, but because I recognized the pain.
I didn't marry you for the inheritance. I married you because you were safe. The word stung. Safe? I echoed. You didn't want anything from me, he said. You didn't look at me like a project or a headline. You were tired, quiet. You knew how to disappear. I swallowed hard. I thought marrying you would be a transaction, he admitted, and I was wrong. Because, I asked, because you made me want to stay, he said simply. Silence wrapped around us, thick and fragile. You should hate me, he added. Everyone else does. I shook my head slowly. I don't hate you. Then what do you feel? He asked. The question terrified me. I feel like I finally understand what it's like to be chosen for the wrong reasons and still fall in love anyway. His breath caught. I never wanted revenge, I continued, or recognition. I just wanted to choose, for once. Bradley reached across the table, stopping inches from my hand. If you walk away, I'll understand. I won't follow. I won't ask. And if I stay, I whispered, then we'll build something real, slowly, without pretending. I pulled my hand back, overwhelmed. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I admitted. He nodded. That's okay. I am. That night, after he left, I stood by the window until the street emptied. My heart felt split down the middle, half longing, half fear. The next morning, the town woke up to headlines. Bradley's name, his face, the truth, public, unavoidable, explosive. Suddenly, everyone knew who my husband really was, and suddenly, everyone wanted us back. Invitations flooded in, apologies. Margaret called for years. I always knew this would turn out well, she said. I laughed, out loud, bitter and free. They thought the revelation would pull me back into place. They were wrong, because now the choice wasn't theirs. It was mine. And standing in that bakery doorway, watching the town scramble to rewrite its story, I realized the hardest part wasn't forgiving Bradley. It was deciding whether I could forgive myself for wanting him anyway. The town didn't wait for me to decide. It never had. They filled the silence with assumptions, the same way they always did. Suddenly, my name appeared again, but differently now. No longer whispered like a burden, but spoken with curiosity, with calculation. Invitations arrived in thick envelopes, dinners, charity galas, casual gatherings that felt anything but. People who hadn't looked at me twice before smiled like we shared history. And then there was Margaret. She arrived at the bakery unannounced, dressed impeccably, eyes sharp with expectation. You should come home, she said, standing among flour sacks and early morning light like she didn't quite belong to either. This separation is unnecessary now. Now. Not when I was lonely, not when I was expendable. Now, when my husband had become valuable. I am home, I replied. She frowned. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm being honest. Margaret sighed, as if I were a problem she'd solved once and didn't want to revisit. You have stability now, recognition, security. You should be grateful. Grateful. The words slid off me without sticking. I didn't sell you off to give you a future, I said quietly. I sold you off to get rid of me. Her expression tightened, not with guilt, but with irritation. I gave you a husband. That's more than life gave me. I met her gaze steadily, and I gave myself back. She left without another word. That evening, Bradley stood at the edge of town, watching lights flicker on in windows that had never welcomed him before. I found him there, hands in his pockets, shoulders squared like a man preparing for judgment. They want us back, he said, without turning. Us, not me. I know, I replied. They think this ends with forgiveness, with appearances restored. And you? I asked. He looked at me then, really looked. No defenses, no careful distance. I don't want revenge, he said. I don't want recognition. I just want to choose. The echo of my own words from days earlier wrapped around us. I stepped closer. "So do I said. The town held its breath when we appeared together again. Cameras flashed, questions followed. Everyone waited for the moment of humiliation or triumph or spectacle. They didn't get it. Instead, I spoke. I wasn't married off to disappear. I was married into becoming someone. The silence that followed was absolute. Bradley reached for my hand, not possessively, not desperately, just present. "I never wanted a wife," he said simply. "I just didn't know I was waiting for her." No declarations of forever, no dramatic kisses, just truth. That night we went home, not to wealth, not to celebration, but to that quiet house with its bare walls and intentional spaces, the one where love had learned to breathe slowly. "I'm scared," I admitted, standing in the doorway. "So am I," he said. "But we're still here," I whispered. "Yes, and tomorrow we'll choose again." I realized then that love wasn't the absence of fear, it was the decision to stay anyway. The town never stopped watching us. It just changed the angle. People smiled more now. They waved. They asked questions that pretended to be polite, but smelled like curiosity wrapped in regret. Some apologized, carefully, vaguely, as if afraid of admitting they'd been wrong in specifics. Others said nothing at all. And that, oddly enough, was easier. Bradley and I didn't rush into anything dramatic. There were no interviews, no statements, no public forgiveness tour. We returned to our routines, the quiet ones that had always mattered more than appearances. Morning coffee, shared glances, evenings that didn't need explanations. The wealth stayed distant, abstract. Lawyers called, documents arrived. Decisions waited patiently on the edges of our lives, but they didn't move into the center. What moved into the center was something far less impressive and far more fragile: trust. "I still flinch sometimes," I admitted one night, curled beside him on the couch. "When people praise me, when they suddenly want to include me." "I do too," he said. "When they say my name like it's worth something again." We learned not to rush those moments away. Healing didn't mean pretending the wounds never existed. It meant acknowledging them without letting them lead. Margaret never apologized. She sent a message once, brief, polite, proud even. "I'm glad things worked out," it read. I stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down. Some people don't know how to love without control. Some never learn. And part of growing up, really growing, is understanding that closure doesn't always arrive wrapped in remorse. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. I didn't need her approval anymore. I had my own. Bradley's family remained distant, cordial, interested in logistics, not reconciliation. He accepted that with the same quiet strength he'd always carried. "They lost their chance," he said simply. "I didn't lose myself." The town continued being the town. It judged, it whispered, it forgot, it remembered again. But now, when they spoke about us, it didn't reach as deep. Because the truth is, being treated as disposable teaches you something powerful. It teaches you how to love without demanding proof, how to choose without needing permission, how to build something meaningful from silence. Our marriage didn't become perfect. We still argued, we still hesitated, we still carried the echoes of who we'd been when we met, tired, guarded, unsure if love could ever feel safe. But every morning we chose again, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of recognition. One night, months later, I stood at the window watching the town lights flicker on, the same way I had so many times before. "They thought this marriage would erase me," I said softly. Bradley stepped beside me, close but not crowding. "Instead," he said, "it gave both of us a future no one else could control." And that was the truth. Not a fairy tale, not revenge, not redemption performed for an audience, just two people who had been underestimated, choosing each other, quietly, every day. Before I say goodbye, let me thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it touched you, if you saw yourself in the silence, the waiting, or the choosing, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to Possible Hearts. And if you feel like sharing, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Every story matters more when it's heard by real hearts in real places. Until next time, remember, sometimes the love that lasts isn't the one that arrives loudly, it's the one that stays.